yeah, happy to do this with you, and any opportunity that I get to cast a light on good topics about parenthood and mental health and being a community, like just playing a role, a leader in your community. It starts at serving. So this is the way that I get to serve.
So for the listeners, Bryan, you're at Woods Homes. Can you tell us about how you got to where you got? I mean, what is Bryan's story? So you're a friend, you're a father, you're a community member.
I'll say this: I'm a benefactor. I've received so much over the years. I think back to my origin of being. I'm the child of a 16-year-old girl who was scared spitless in the late 70s of what to do next. My mom is a courageous human being. She said yes when a lot of people at that time were considering otherwise, and even encouraged her otherwise. So I'm grateful for those voices and that internal conviction for her to say yes, and profoundly inspired by my mom. It was rocky when children are having babies. There's all sorts of things that come as a result, and early on, I think I was exposed to some bumpy roads, and so and for a short time, I found myself in the care of others. Again, leading back to me being filled with gratitude. It was because of the kindness of others. Again, going back to a yes, because of someone saying yes. Hey, that child deserves a chance, a place to belong, a place to be cared for. And at so many different points in my life, that has been what has marked the next decision, or the being grateful and operating out of a place of gratitude and humility. It's my privilege to give back. I've gotten so much from my community.
What do you remember though, Bryan? What do you remember of your childhood where people were there for you? They lent out that hand and they helped you, sometimes you didn't even know you needed the help.
Yeah, that's just it. I mean, especially through my adolescent years, I don't need anybody, and then realized how much I actually did need. I think marked by the sheer amount of times that I moved as a young person. I think at one point I lost count, but about 50 moves before I was hit the age of 20, and I lived in care and out of the benevolence of others. A wonderful family who took me in very, very critical years of my life, who provided a level set, a place to belong. I'm eternally grateful. It was my best friend's family that took me in. I'll tell you, that was a huge course correction for me when really things could have really come apart. He's been the best man in my wedding to this day, though he's down in Texas and I'm up here. We continue to be close, and I'm just incredibly grateful for these sort of people that have come in at different points of the journey. They've found me at the right time, and when it could have gone a very different way.
When you look back at your childhood, was there moments in time where that pain and trauma and the stuff you're dealing with, you felt alone? And where did you channel that energy to becoming the man you are today? Because, you're a friend of mine and you're just an amazing human being. And I can't say enough of you. You're kind, you're helpful and resourceful when people need it. So obviously something went right. You took some of the right paths.
Yeah, I reflect back on it a little bit. I've got two siblings. My sister, who is I think doing well and much better than at different points in the past. And my brother, who passed away this year due to a very nasty fight with cancer, we look sometimes and reflect what was different. They had a more challenging road. I think when I reflect on it in that way, I wonder what was the difference. It was a choice. Someone held out hope to me. Someone I owe a great deal of acknowledgement to. His name's Ken Connolly. He's a craftsman home builder on Vancouver Island. But he opened his home. I remember going there. I was part of like a leadership group through an organization called Young Life. I didn't know what course I was on at that time. It was very divergent. But I saw in him lived out in his family and in public a very integrated life, a man of faith, but he lived it genuinely. I couldn't put my finger on it because I'd never seen nor experienced a person of faith living out authentically, or what I would consider authentically, until I met him. And he would invite me. He would just always have a chair empty in his Toyota Land Cruiser, his like 1970s Toyota Land Cruiser. He's like, I'm going to the hardware store. Do you want to come? Growing up without a father figure in my life, he became a pseudo father figure. He really illuminated his care for his children, his care for his community. It was very profound. And I will not forget the day he said, wide is the path, but narrow is the gate where you're going to find the opportunity. And it's found in hope in a person. And for me, that's a faith journey for me as a Christian. And that really has shaped my worldview and my ethos in life. And I have to point back to that time. Without it, I'm not sure what today would look like.
Were you a believer in faith growing up, or was there a certain age that it kind of resonated with you and said, this makes sense now? And when you mean authentically, living authentically within your faith, what does that mean?
No, I didn't. That was a very foreign concept. I think morally we lived well. I think not without our challenges and ups and downs as a family. Obviously, I alluded to my childhood. I think a sense of, at different points, a feeling of abandonment and loneliness and almost like a darkness that you couldn't see through. And when I say authentically, I saw something different. Ken's family went through a really difficult series and challenging period in their lives where they went through some really heinous health issues. But I looked at how they looked into the future with hope, seeing something ahead of them that I'm like, how do you even see that? I would be losing my mind. And yet they seem to grasp solidly or cling to a foundation that was bigger than them, something that didn't shift. I think the authenticity was that they stayed true to it even in that time. I've benefited so greatly from that when the life's challenges come, and they do come, and they come sometimes as cascading walls of water. Or as we see right now in California, we saw in Jasper, they come in walls of flames. They can look insurmountable in terms of odds, and to know that you've got something beyond yourself, your possessions, your career, that you can root yourself on, I think is a really powerful expression.
Did you ever become bitter or resentful? And if you did, how did you overcome that? Because at times, we can get caught up in that vicious circle.
Yeah.
And it's self-sabotage at the end of the day.
You got it. I was 16. I remember the moment vividly, and I remember just finding out some really like hard news about my childhood and who I was. That I felt like was important to my identity, and it felt like the rug was pulled out from underneath me. And I remember jumping in my car and driving up a mountain on a logging road and staring out over it's on Vancouver Island, over the city of Nanaimo, and then in the distance over the strait, seeing Vancouver, knowing that there were millions of people in front of me. It was a lonely moment. It was one where I knew I needed to be on a different course, but I had no idea. And there was a lot of bitterness. I think I talked a little bit about that family opening their home to me in that critical years, in my teen years. That was the divergent road. That was the possibility of me, saying this experience will define me and has ruined me, or this experience will help guide and direct my future. And I'm so relieved that I wasn't a victim to that experience or that knowledge, but rather there was a course set forward that allowed me to have victory over some of those things.
Yeah. I always call it an aha moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
That spark where we have a choice now.
Yeah.
We continue the path we're going, or do we pivot for the betterment of ourselves and then our community, our society, all around?
You bet.
What brought you out to the prairies, Bryan?
I married a prairie girl. So my wife Kaylee is she's wonderful. We've shared a lot of experiences in work and in life. I think our courses merged together in our desire to serve, specifically young people. We worked in the same organization, independent, met each other on a bus taking kids to a camp. We remember this differently from each other. I'm going to tell you my version because I think it's more correct. But the teenage boys that I was mentoring got on the bus that was already loaded with the kids from her area, an upper economic community in Vancouver on the west side, where she was working whilst going to UBC. There were some beautiful kids on that bus, and my boys were like gobsmacked, and but they had no game. And I'm really sorry. Some of these guys are going to tune in and watch us, and I'm like, move aside. Let me show you how it's done. And I saw Kaylee, and I was right away. I was beholden. I probably don't say this enough, or as I ought, and recommend to anyone who's watching. Remind those who you love what you love so much about them. But I was taken by her right away. She, in fact, was not taken by me right away. But like I said, I had to show these boys, what it takes, and so we headed off, and found out she was from Edmonton, and then I was like, this could be an issue. There was one point where she didn't know if she was going to come back to Vancouver or go back to Edmonton, and I pursued her heavily. And when we got married, we had an opportunity to take a look at where we were going to move, where we were going to live and make a life together. And we had an opportunity between Calgary, Fort McMurray, and Hamilton, Ontario. And Calgary just instantly leapt out to us, and we're grateful. We were invited with such open arms. That community that invited us to come and work and build our lives here today continue to surround us, and that was back in 2009. So we've been able to set up quite a community of support, and we wouldn't be able to make a life and raise our family without those people having said yes to us as well.
Why has Woods Homes been so important to who you are in terms of your ideology, your morals, your values? What do you stand for? Why has it been so important?
I started, it'll be 3 years in April that I've been with Woods Homes. The previous organization that I worked with, we had some relationship with Woods Homes in that vein. At the time, I was running programs and overseeing a number of facets of that organization regionally, and knew of Woods Homes, knew of the work. When the opportunity was presented to me by a mentor, Scott Dexheimer, with Avista Philanthropy, he was very familiar with Woods Homes. He was someone that I trusted within the realm of fundraising and community building. And he said, I think this might be a great spot for you. I'm grateful that he tapped me on the shoulder, because it's felt like coming home. I alluded to earlier, my childhood was a bit of a bumpy road. That lived experience, I think, I just see the opportunity to be an influencer, a gatherer, a community rallier, to say, hey, look, there's these kids and they need you. They need you to come to the table with your gifts, your talents, your abilities, your passion, your impact. I don't do the frontline work. We have incredible staff. The people who work here are the most lovely human beings. They care so profoundly for the children, the young people and their families that come through our doors each and every day. Our role is we get to gather the rest of the community to hold them up. And I think that's incredible. It's like you're a cheerleader and a megaphone at the same time. So, yeah.
For the listeners, what exactly is Woods Homes? If they don't know, if they're not from Calgary, it's all over. But if they're not from Calgary, how do you explain Woods Homes?
Well, I'll explain it this way. I talked about saying yes. In 1914, a young serviceman who was a widower. He had 2 children. The war was breaking out in Europe, and he went to Reverend George and Annie Wood, and it's Woods Homes. It was their home. They said yes to these 2 children, taking care of them while their father went off to war. Later, the Spanish flu hit in 1918, and more children ended up coming into the care of George and Annie. From the beginning, there was a yes to the kids that needed a place to live, a home, a family, a safe place to preside. What it is today is as we've grown and over the years, we've seen different growth points in our history where we saw that having an orphanage for kids who had nowhere else to go wasn't enough. There were more gaps, more needs that were evident in the community in the province of Alberta, and so we started developing other opportunities to serve in the mental health space, in fostering programs, inviting other families to open their homes, to providing emergency youth shelters and warming centers, to today where we actually run an opportunity hub, supportive housing and recovery programs, and even partners with groups like the Calgary Public Library with wellness desks. So, we're delivering services now to over 20,000 people in our province, making it easier to access and gain resources, insights, counseling, support, crisis intervention, all of these things to our most vulnerable, and that's our future, our kids. So
I know a few friends of mine that I didn't know at the time had actually gone through Woods Homes.
Wow.
It was incredible to see that, and said, they were there for me when I didn't have anybody. And I was like, and you turned out the way you are, an incredible human. So it gives me chills, because it's a process. We're all learning, we're all growing, but I do love the mental health component. And, thank you for being an advocate for men and dads, just people all around for men's mental health. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you got it, man. It's a privilege. And as you shared, I'm I'm surprised each and every time that we go out and do an event or we go out into the community, those who come forward, quietly, because it's complex. They come quietly and they say, I was a Woods Homes kid. My brother, it's someone, my dad, my grandpa, that storied history, again, a complex history, but one that I think, has made a very indelible impact on our culture, on our city, on our prosperity, on the ability for kids to find a place to be rooted and to grow into the future.
Bryan, do we know the metrics since 1914 of how many kids have come through the program?
Yeah, there's competing numbers on that. I know over the last 5 years, we've been consistently serving about 20,000 people. Before that, those numbers, were hovering in around the 10,000 mark. And so when you start adding it up over 110, this is now our 111th year going into it. Anyways, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of lives affected by this organization. It is such a rich history. I like to say our logo is a tree, and people ask why the tree. Obviously woods, but I like to draw this parallel that we're rooted in our history, but all about our future, providing coverage, providing safety and shelter and cover and provision. As trees do, for those we care about.
Is that home still around, by the way?
So when in 1926 they moved their orphanage from Olds in Innisfil to the municipality of what was then Bowness, and so so that site continues to serve today. It was previously the Hextall Mansion, and so. For those who like looking that up, this actually exists. The property exists just above the Bowness Lagoon, and at the time there's a very interesting interplay between Woods Homes and that property, and what we now know is Bowness Park, which is such a cherished jewel of a park in our city. The kids would go down and clear the lagoon for a place to go ice skating. There's this great legacy, I guess, to that space as a recreation and play space for children that we continue to have. I mean, being able to go out and enjoy that space ourselves is such a meaningful, whether it's in the summer, down to the park, playing in the water park or skating the lagoon. It's very, very cool.
As a guy, how come it's been such an important factor of your being men's mental health? Because you participated in Mentel, you're an ambassador for Day One Dads. Shout out to Curtis and Steve.
Yeah.
But how did this all become, you were just at the gathering speaking, which was incredible to see. So you're really pushing the envelope for us guys out there. So thank you.
Well, I just know personally my own journey. When I became a father, I was like, I don't know what this looks like. I feel like I'm groping in the dark a little bit here on like what does it mean to be a man, a husband, and a father. And there was no real route forward. I had a disruptive moment in my life in 2015. And my eldest was just about 2 years old, and I was home, being the house parent. And I remember at the time the economy was in a sack. People were losing their jobs left, right, and center. I would push the stroller through the mall because I didn't know even where else to go, and I'd give the knowing nod, you too, eh? Of other dads pushing strollers who had also been packaged off from their jobs, and I would otherwise sit at home and binge watch Paw Patrol and Netflix, trying to pull myself out of a rut. And it was a terrible rut. I remember Kaylee saying to me, she's like, you can't just let her 2-year-old watch Netflix. Like, you got to go do stuff. And we were pushed out the door in a way as a proof point that we got out of the house today. We went and did something. And I take photos and I put them up on Instagram and send them to my wife. And what came of that was people being really inspired and interested, like, oh, that's a great idea. Oh, I should share that with my husband. Or, and it became YYC Dad. And so, going back to how I involved with Day One Dads was, I was one of the first followers of Day One Dads as they emerged, doing this sort of ad hoc resourcing for dads to say, hey, it's not enough. The outcomes for our kids really are dependent on an active and positive male figure in their lives. And it's becoming really well backed up by research. The National Research Chair and Children's Mental Health, we can look at, which is with Woods Home's Dr. Angelique Jenny. She points to this, but it's well documented that outcomes for children who have this in their lives are much better. All the key indicators. And so it was a push out the door. And as I was sharing this message, I was sharing it with anyone who would listen. But if you need to take care of yourself too. And actually going and doing stuff with your kids is going to be a bit of therapy for you. Our children are a great mirror held up to our own faces to see our shortcomings, but also our beauties. And so I was recognizing in myself, mirroring back to me, and my children do this really well for me, is when I'm dysregulated, they're dysregulated. When I'm struggling, they're going to struggle. And it's a real opportunity, forge better, create opportunities. I remember there were crossroads there where people were monetizing their channels.
Yes.
Mummy blogs, and then there was a small cadre of us that were doing sort of dad blog type stuff, and to monetize. And no disreputation to anyone who has it. I think there's great need for it for some. But I did want to monetize what I was doing. I was really about, like, how do I help people? How do I expose them? There are other options. Go to Bass Pro and go check out the aquarium, right?
It's
the
always
Calgary
fun.
aquarium.
Yeah, exactly. Go to Pisces or
Yeah, exactly. We went to Pisces. The auto show. My love for things like cars. My love for cooking. And
Go Time Barbecue.
Exactly. Those things were the things that I got to share. My love for sport. Now, having been coaching my son's soccer team for a number of years, that's what's bonded us. That's what's really kind of kept us together and gelled. So,
did you always go back in your mind and say, well, my dad wasn't here for me, so I got to be 10 times better of a dad? And, you put that pressure on yourself, and it's not bad. It's not good. I mean, it's just neutral, right? If we would do that, right? It's a tendency. It's like, treat someone better than you were treated.
I think we all do that in our own way, right? Like, my mom or my dad or whatever never did this. Maybe even on our professional roles, my boss. So I'm going to be a better boss. We all kind of have this inner stir, and I'm grateful to say to those who are listening, thank you, that I actually have a relationship with my biological father today.
Listen.
And I'm so grateful, and he is such a great grandfather to my boys. We're on a journey of healing that relationship and that gap, and he is such a beautiful man, a peaceful man, a musician. I have an abundance of love for him, but we miss that. And for me, meal times with my kids, with our family are really important. We rarely miss dinner together. We try to create opportunities to make connections, and make things meaningful. And part of that's driven out of what I didn't have. And part of it is, I think, Kaylee's, my wife's family, had a really keen and good sense of that. And so it's bringing both of those things together, right? It's bringing those things together. I think if you operate out of what you didn't have, there's an opportunity to become a victim. And if you can focus on what we can build for the future, it becomes far more rewarding and richer and genuine, and not as, I think it can come off. Our kids are very intuitive. They can see through, like, oh, okay, this is forced. All right. So
we have a mutual friend, Jackson, and he brought us all together last year with a golf tournament, Woods Homes Mentel. And thank you for speaking up in June for Men's Mental Health Month. I know it's 1 month, but it's a moment to focus on something, hyper focus on it. So for the rest of the year, people are talking about it. Why is it important as a guy to not just hold all this in and just, keep it in our heads and don't speak about it? Don't talk to people about things that are going on in our minds.
I think we all have the capacity to catastrophize our experiences. I have a dear friend, Jesse Jarvis. He runs a group called Dare to Dad. It's funny. I got to do the initial course with him that he designed. And as we were going through it, he said, "What forms us, right? Like, what informs why we dad the way that we dad, or what informs why we are men? Because what was our relationship with, like, our father? What are our relationships with them now? What are our male relationships like in our everyday world? Well, who's your six?" I love this analogy.
Who's got your back?
Yeah. Well, and when I say who's your six, it takes six to carry your coffin at the end of the day. Who's going to be there when everything else falls? Do you have that? Who's the company you keep? Which is a fantastic book by, pardon me, it's his name.
1 second, let me just pull it up.
David Bentall.
Okay.
And he writes of the cadre of guys that he keeps in his life. So why is it important? Why do I keep kind of driving this forward and taking it seriously? Men were notoriously few for words, especially when the stakes are high. We're strivers. We want to fix things. We want to build things. But it's really difficult. Those men have a harder time, broad strokes, harder time communicating how they feel, or even stating that they've missed the mark. Having those people in your peripheries, opening you up to maybe your blind spots, so important. I think men are more involved in the different areas of raising children and making a home than they ever have been. But I also think that there's a sense of we can't do enough, and it's a terrible weight to bear on your own. And so you really do need to have these voices in your life to say it's okay. You honestly aren't enough. And that's probably the hardest lesson to learn, that you can't do it by yourself. It's a weight too heavy to carry, and unfortunately we see it played out in suicide completion rates. People who die by suicide, these are not new stats. It's 3/4 of all people who die by suicide are men. It's an unfathomable number, and we have to speak up. And we have to create lanes and opportunities. The golf tournament was a great one. But I love what Jackson did there, was with his buddies, with the community of guys, so the cadre of men in his life. He created an event. Guys, this goes back to prehistoric man, like the hunters, right? The women would go and gather, they'd talk, be like, "Don't eat that. It'll give you a rash," or
exactly.
There's a lot of talking about how the men, we would stalk our prey. Little to say, few words.
Lions.
We'd get out there and we'd make the kill, and we'd bring back the beast, and there'd be a big fire and talking and celebration, and if you've ever watched Steve Rinella on Meat Eater or these hunting shows, you see these brute men break into tears when having made the kill or made that the victory, and it discards us. So there's experiences together, whether it's fishing, I love, it's golf, it's something you do together, gives you the ability to be vulnerable. It breaks down those walls. You've done something together. Now you can really bond. You can create a meaningful connection.
What would you say to your younger self today? Because there's a child in all of us.
You know, I, the one thing that keeps reoccurring in my life, I'm enough, even in my lack of I'm enough. Um,
There- there-
that reassuring, whether it was self-assuring, and I don't mean that in a way of like building self-esteem. I don't mean it in a esteem way, um, um, but sometimes we wish we were more, we had more,
Before I do.
that we were better at doing this or that, or that our circumstances were different. But being okay with what you are today, or as a child, that I was okay. I didn't need to be more than I was. So
Is there anything in 2025 that you aspire for, or Woods Homes is doing that is going to bring the community together?
on a personal note, be there for the people in my community, my staff, my team. You mentioned the gathering earlier. Gary V. He says he's like, it's really important for you as a leader to know this. Your employees are your boss. If you don't get
True.
that, you're lost. You're
True.
you're up the creek, right? So serving and knowing my people well, giving them the opportunity to thrive, to truly thrive, to build into them, to reward, to acknowledge faster, good work, right? To call out work that isn't going well faster, and to really promote fastest, to say, yeah, this is worth celebrating on a professional and as an organizational level. We've gone through a season of growth. 2025 marks what we're really calling 21st century care. It's looking into the future and saying, throughout history, we've had to iterate. We've had to see where the gaps are. 2025 is about delivering on making sure that the gaps are closed. Saying, yeah, we're gonna create more beds. We're gonna create more space. We're gonna create. It's gonna be informed for optimal success, and we're gonna track and make sure that we're delivering on our promise. That when we say yes, that whoever's in our care feels that profound care and that follows them for better outcomes in the future. And so that's really 2025.
No, I appreciate your time today, man. Thank you for this.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, Zach, I want to say, I deeply appreciate your thoughtfulness. You noticed some artwork in my office, and it's right now. You got me a couple pieces of art. I share this story about the Mandalorian, and I thank you for your thoughtfulness towards this. Is how the Mandalorian, this brute of a man, disconnected to anyone really, as a merchant for hire, a mercenary for hire, gets involved with a kid and is transformed. There's a transformative power when we invest in others, when we open ourselves up to caring for others. And so your gift to me of the continuation of that art, having Grogu and the post baptism Mandalorian are going to hang in my office here as a stark reminder of the work that we get to do. So if you're listening or you're tuning in to this podcast, my hope for you is that there are people in your life that cause you to want to break down the walls, to open up and be transformed to the better version of who you are. And that happens internally. It's not just the exterior, but it's an internal work, and it's worth it. It takes a village, they say, to raise a child. Now more than ever, in our disconnected world and synthetic relationships,
AI world that we're in.
Yeah, having real relationships are so important. So thank you, Zach, because I was so blessed by that. Thank you.
Oh, well, you know what? You're a good friend, and you're doing some incredible things, and it's a redemption story.
Yeah,
it's a full circle.
Yeah, it's not too late for you. If you're listening, it is not too late.
Never too late. You know what? I have gone down paths where I was like, whoa, I got to pivot. But again, aha moments in life. And you say, this is not serving me. What am I doing? Turn the corner. Yeah. As a diehard vegan, do you have a dish that you'd recommend to anybody? I'm just kidding. For Go Time, I hope this year that you kick it off again. I know you and your boys love fishing. Is there going to be some barbecuing happening?
There's absolutely barbecue in the near future here. So this mild weather has actually really provided a nice opportunity here. So so a couple things. Justin Pursuto, who he is an influencer. He's out of Kelowna. He's married to
Jillian.
Jillian. So anyways, they do a lot of vegan cooking in their home. He's got great vegan barbecue recipes, a couple that I've tried out. He actually grew up in the neighborhood right across from where we live here in Calgary. And so he and I had a good chat. But in terms of barbecue, I think that's my next challenge is looking at what outside of our basic meat proteins can I start infusing smoke and flavor to. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm old fashioned. I'm a stick burner. I love fire and smoke when it comes to cooking. Graham Sherman calls me the stick burner. He's of Tool Shed fame and notorious PIG.
Red Rage.
Yeah, Red Rage. You got it. He's a wonderful storyteller. He inspires me a lot to chase after these things out of live your passion. So I think my next big thing is mastering some butchery. Like I want to learn how to we have a beautiful bird dog, Sir Remington. He's a wire-haired pointing griffon. So there'll be some upland bird and wetland bird hunting coming up this year, and learning how to smoke a duck, and prepare some wild game. I'm not a big game hunter myself, though I have a big respect for it. And fishing. I just one of the highlight moments. My mother-in-law grew up in the wilds of Alaska and Montana. Her father was a fish and wildlife game officer, and upon first meeting her, Kaylee and I drove from the coast to Golden, where they've got a cabin, and we stopped on the side of the road in Chase, British Columbia, went fishing, and I caught a beautiful 4-pound rainbow trout, and I brought that home for dinner, and I instantly won her over. So it was teach a man to fish, they say. But being able to pass along some of these rites of passage, being passed along these skill sets to my boys, you realize that groceries don't just come from a store. you realize that there's actually greater philosophies that are wrapped up in the hunt and in cooking. There's a warmth and a love that comes from preparing it, but also going and getting it. There's a sacrifice and a time to it. So, anyways, I love all of those things as well, and look for more to happen there.
When you smoke things, do you prefer hickory? Do you prefer apple? What's your smoke?
Oak. Now we don't have a lot of post oak here in Alberta, and
Nope.
but I think it depends on what it is. The what you're cooking will depend a lot on what you're going to use in terms of flavor profile. So those oaks are really mild. The cherries and apples are more sweet. They're better for like a chicken or a pork or whatever. But I'm a oak fan. Hickory's a little too much.
I agree. I
Yeah,
agree.
it's a little too forceful. But yeah, I'm a post oak fan.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you again for your time today.
You got it, man. Best to you, and excited to see more. As I see there's some folks coming up on the podcast. I'm excited to tune in.